Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. If anyone has a story that they would like to share or any evidence they would like to share on this show, you can contact me at brentonson@gmail.com. And if anyone wants to contribute, and thank you to all you that have contributed the last couple months, you can go to a link in the description, PayPal me, and it's super easy to use. Click it and you don't have to have a bunch of information to use it. So it's a very simple way to take contributions to help keep this show going. Now, today we have Bill. He is a police officer from Oklahoma, a year away from retiring, and he heard the Kurt Stanley interview about the Chicken Man. So this guy thought he would call in because he said, "Hey, that's my story." So anyway, he contacted me and said, "I'd like to, tell my version of what happened, and some other stories and interesting things happening on some properties he has. Even a canine print that is huge. He casted it and he sent a picture with a tape measure beside it. You're going to find that interesting. And some pictures. He accidentally caught a Bigfoot sitting in the background beside a pond, overlooking a pond, and there's evidence there where this thing was sitting, where it was sitting there twisting limbs and things like that. Something a human certainly couldn't do. You couldn't twist a tree like this, even though it isn't a huge tree, but something 2.5, 3 inches in diameter, you're not going to be able to take your hand and just twist the heck out of it and make it into a break, but bound and twisted real tight. Anyway, you'll see it, and it's quite interesting evidence there. And anyway, he shares quite a few encounters and pieces of stories that he has had throughout the years, and I think you're going to enjoy this. And his name is Bill from Oklahoma. Okay, Bill, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for contacting me after hearing Kurt Stanley's story. And but let's start with you giving an introduction to yourself, and then we'll get into some of the stories that you have.
Well, sir, my name is Bill. I live here in Oklahoma City. I was living in El Reno, and at the time the El Reno Chicken Man incident happened, and a buddy of mine and I were out coon hunting along the North Canadian River when we ran into this Bigfoot before it actually developed into the El Reno Chicken Man incident. It was about a couple of weeks beforehand.
Right. So now, if you would, can you tell us what you do for a living so we can establish that you're a trained observer and things like that, and then we'll go from that point.
Yes, sir. Currently, I'm a police officer. I've been in law enforcement since 1987. Let's see, I'm a former Marine. Been an assistant scoutmaster for 20 plus years. So I spend a lot of time in the outdoors. And I do know about observing details and all that.
Right. Yeah, that's helpful, in establishing credibility for
yes,
people's accounts of what they saw. Now, this Chicken Man story. What was going on with this creature? What was it doing, and how did it come to everybody's attention?
Well, a buddy of mine and I went coon hunting. It was in December 1970. It was a full moon, cloudless night. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, but we had gone out by the North Canadian River by Foreman Bridge. And at that time, you could drive towards the river, and right before you got to the bridge and the river, there was a little dirt road you could turn off to the right. And that would kind of run kind of on the south side of the river. And there was a place right along the edge of the river that was where people would go to dump trash and things like that. So we had parked there, and we hunted and didn't have any luck at all. So about 2 o'clock, we were sitting back at the truck, drinking a little bit of coffee, and we're just talking about how we kind of got skunked that night. But I noticed a skunk popping down the trail, walking towards the truck. And I thought, well, dadgum, if I shoot him, would you skin him out and make a hat out of him? So my buddy says, sure. So I got out of the truck, and I'm sighting in on him, and it felt like someone had just run their hand up the backside of my neck. I mean, all my hairs was just standing straight up, and I thought, boy, something's watching me. This don't feel right. And so I look off to my right towards the river, at the edge of the river, and there's a tree trunk laying there. And I'm looking at that tree trunk, and I see a shadow on the back side of it. And I'm thinking, what in the world? So I look up towards the full moon to see what's casting that shadow, between the moon and the trunk there. And there's nothing there. So I look back at the trunk, and I see this bright red light, just the deepest red, about the size of a pop bottle, the end of a pop bottle. And I'm looking at that, and I see another one. And it's like, holy smokes. These are eyes I'm looking at. And I'm thinking, well, it can't be. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's reflectors. Sometimes people put reflectors on their tree trunks at entrances to drives and all that, driveways. But when these things started blinking, then it's like I hollered at my buddy, and I said, man, you got to get out here and take a look at this thing. So he steps out of the vehicle, and he looks over there where I'm pointing, and it sounded like an ice box rolling down that bank. And it hit the water. Well, it frozen as ice and all, but it hit the water and ice, and it took off running to the west. It was zigzagging from sandbank to sandbank, going eastbound. And this thing was, I remember how thick it was, how wide, how tall it was, and it was fast. It was like no time at all. It was out of sight. And we're standing there, we're looking at each other like, what have we just seen? So we make a pact that, we're not going to talk about this to anybody. Just keep it amongst ourselves. And it wasn't but a week or so later, the Reno Chicken Man story made the news. Well, that happened on Old Highway 81, where it crosses the North Canadian River, which is, well, from where we were, it was several miles to the west. And I'm thinking, well, that's just what in the heck we saw. But it come down, the Reno Chicken Man deal, it had come down off the river. Now, there's two bridges there now. There's the old original one where this happened there, and then there's a new one. But the old original one is where this thing, the Reno Chicken Man, took place. But there's a kind of like a draw that comes south off that river, and it goes right up to Mr. Palmer's place. He had a rent house there, and whatever it was come up off the river, up that draw, and went in there and just tore this chicken coop all to pieces, killed all the birds in there, tore it all up, and went back towards the river. Well, right along at where that draw hits the river, there was watermelon plants growing. Now, not at this time, but that Palmer had watermelon patch there, so he had that all the time out there, so there's plenty of food for this thing to eat. But it had everybody all stirred up. I talked to one of the officers there, Reno police officers, like the next day after it hit the news, and he was telling me that it whatever it was went in there and killed these birds. Didn't eat them, it just killed them. It just smashed them and tore them up and left them. And of course, it tore the door to the coop off and threw it out in the field. I think there was a handprint on that, but there was footprints up and down going from the river and back towards it, where this thing come on all fours. And then he's telling me it looked like it walked around on two legs, then it went back down to four legs and went back towards the river.
Wow.
But but that all happened. Our incident happened on the south side of the river. And that's right behind that tree that was laying there, that tree trunk.
So it could
even ran towards the west.
So it could have even been the same creature then, huh?
That's what I'm thinking. But
Wow.
since that time, I've heard that there's probably a group of 3 of them that has been seen over the years out there, and of course the Concho Indian Reservation is just north of where the El Reno Chicken Man happened. And there's a Lucky Star Casino there, and there was some video footage taken from their security cameras of a Sasquatch getting into their trash cans out there.
Yeah, that Kurt was telling me about that, and
Mm-hmm.
sent me a link to it, and um, that was kind of big news around there too, wasn't it?
Oh yes, sir. That stuff has been going on well since '70 on up until present times. You hear stories about that, about stuff happening out there.
All right. Why do you think that this thing would have killed the chickens and not took any of it for food?
I don't know. There is no telling. But officer, I think his name's Apple, was was pretty amazed that it went in there and just did all that damage. And it seemed like it didn't take anything. It just killed the stuff in there. I don't know if it was mad or what. There's no telling.
Yeah. Maybe it were those chickens laying eggs. Maybe it took eggs.
Could have been. Yeah, could have been.
Yeah.
I don't really
Yeah.
know.
Other than to maybe send somebody a message or something, or if
Well,
was the chickens agitated? I mean, that's kind of a mystery in a way. Why it
hmm
would just
well,
go in there.
it could have been those people living there at that time could have been taking pot shots at this rascal. He may have been in and out of there before at nighttime, and they're shooting at him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's hard saying, isn't because
Mm-hmm.
it's either sending a message or it took something to eat, because
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't think it would waste its time for no reason at all. Yeah, I mean that
Yeah.
would seem odd anyway. So when you saw this thing, I think it's very interesting when people sense that something is looking at them. Uh,
Yes.
so you felt like there was something in the area watching you.
I mean, I no sooner got out of that truck and I'm aiming, trying to get a bead on that skunk, and it felt like someone just rubbed their hand against the hackles on the back of my neck. They were just standing straight up, and I turned around and I didn't see any eyes at first. I just saw a big black shadow, and then I looked up there towards the moon to see what's casting the shadow. And then when I looked back over at the shadow, that's when I saw that first red eye, and then the second one, and still I'm not really believing their eyes. I'm thinking, well, maybe these are reflectors off a tree. But then when they went to blinking, I thought, oh yeah, that's definitely something looking at us there.
Yeah. At that point, what was you thinking it was?
I was sitting there looking at that going, yeah, this could headgum well be a Bigfoot, because when it got up and slid off the side of that bank, it was from what we saw when it first started rearing up, it was pretty thick. And then when it went rolling down, I just, in my mind, I pictured it rolling, because you could hear it banging into all kinds of trash and stuff. And then it hit that water and that ice, and then it was upright, just zigzagging towards the west.
Right.
That thing was, it was nighttime, but it was full moon, and you could see the size and shape of this thing real easy.
Right. Now, when it comes to these eyes being red, were they bright?
It was the brightest red I can ever say I've ever seen on any eyes. These things were just bright LED red. And
Huh.
it looked like the end of a pop bottle to me, as big around as they were.
Right. So,
I don't know if that was red from the light from the truck, the dome light, or the moon shining down. I don't know, but they sure was bright.
yeah, no, that's one thing that is also a mystery to me, is because they seem to have way brighter eyes than just some type of light reflecting, like the moon or a dome light in your vehicle. Uh, when people describe it, it just seems too bright that it's just a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is. I don't know, but When people describe it, it's kind of disturbing to think that they would have the ability to be that bright. But when you saw the size of the eyes, did that, how scared, did you get scared?
Well, I was probably more shocked than anything when I realized that those were actually eyes I'm looking at, because those suckers were big and round. I mean, they were huge. And it was just a bright red. I mean, just a bright red. And then when they started blinking, then I knew, yeah, those are definitely eyes.
Yeah, yeah. Something about the color red too that just is not good. It doesn't seem right. You know what I mean? So,
well, it may have been the darkness around it at nighttime, but boy, those look pretty darn bright to me.
Yeah, yeah. How tall do you reckon the thing was?
Oh my gosh, I really I couldn't say. I just know that as it was, the shape of it was rearing up. It was really thick and wide, and then when we saw it actually upright running away from us, it was tall. I mean, looking down in the riverbed, and it was going from sandbar to sandbar, it was tall and it was thick. So this thing was definitely huge. It was a lot bigger than a man.
Right. Yeah. Now, do you did you get maybe a visual on the shape of the head, shoulders, and things like that?
Well, the shoulders were very wide, and I could tell it. The thing had a head on it, but it looked like it was just right on them.
Right.
Just sitting right on them, but it was just really wide.
Right. Yeah, that's a typical description. Wow, that's a very scary sounding situation. I get.
There's no telling how long that thing been watching us, because we sit there for a good 30 minutes trying to get some coffee in us to warm up.
Right. Did you get the skunk?
I clean forgot about that thing. We got out of there as soon as we realized what had happened.
Yeah, heck with that skunk. It's time to go,
Yep.
Right. Well, I guess that was good for the skunk, huh?
Yes, sir.
If you're a skunk, that's a good thing there, I reckon. But anyway, you sent me some very interesting pictures too. Can you tell me a little bit about some of these pictures?
Oh, yes, sir. My wife's family has some land in eastern Oklahoma, and they have a ranch out there. And we have it's an A-frame cabin, more or less in the middle of it. It's really isolated and secluded. But there's been Bigfoot activity going on there since the first time we saw anything of note would be in about 1981. And since then, there has been things happen off and on over the years. It seems like mainly it's active around the end of June, when the wild blackberry bushes are covered in the blackberries. And then in around deer season, the persimmon trees are covered in persimmons, and they seem to be coming around the place.
Right.
But it's been ongoing for a while now.
Right. Let's see. One of these pictures looked like someone standing in the picture, and there's several huge trees crisscrossing like a teepee structure.
Yeah.
X formation. Where's that at? On the same property?
Okay, yes, sir. That's on the same property, and it's north of where the A-frame is. So there's an A-frame cabin, and then there's a rock walkway about 25 yards going north, and there's a circular barbecue pit. Then there's a small pond kind of wraps around there, and then on the levee of that pond, on the far back side, it drops down into a canyon that runs right straight to I-40. And down in that canyon is where these things have been coming and going up, from the cabin and back. And we got off down in there one day and did some walking and exploring, and we ran into all kind of tree structures and limb breaks, and then that wall of logs, it looked like they were just woven. It's just amazing how tall that thing was and how big those logs were. They weren't limbs, they were logs. and
Yeah.
they're all snapped off. They're not sawed or cut. They're all snapped off and just woven in there.
I mean, that takes a heck of a large animal to be able to do
Yeah.
that with those are humongous, you know.
Yes, sir.
I can
Yep.
see I can see a person stand there. You can tell it's a grown man. And
Yep, that's my son standing there
yeah,
with his double barrel shotgun.
right, yeah. I mean, that's amazing that they could do such a, they could pick those up and break those and things like that.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Now you had one picture also that where there's a wide shot and then there's a cropped picture. Can you tell me about
Yes.
that?
Yes, sir. That was taken about 3 weeks ago at out the back side. We have the A-frame cabin up on top side. Well, we just recently sold that property, and we kept the lower level, the meadows. And there's a rock house down there that we were at. And my son was just taking just panoramic shots of the country around us, our property. And one of them, he was pointing towards where we have these metal corrals, and there's a pond. And he's about close to 200 yards away when we took that photo. Well, about a week or so ago, I'm going through looking at these pictures, and I start zooming in, and I see a limb that's broken hanging. So I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, well, something's broke at. It looks just like a tree break. So I start scanning to the left, and that's where I spotted this thing sitting there right by the edge of this pond, looking over the levee. He's looking to the south. He's got his back to the camera. You can see his left shoulder, the left part of his back, his left leg, and there's no doubt about it, there's something sitting there. Well, we went back down there this past Saturday, and I went right out there just to make sure there wasn't like a feed barrel sitting there or a stump or a tree, and there's definitely nothing there except for the cedar bush that had these limbs twisted and broken. So that thing was sitting right there where we found those limb breaks and twists.
Yeah,
That pond hasn't. Yep.
yeah, we were talking about that earlier. It looks like he at one point was standing and used his right hand or left, depending on which way he did it, because the twist goes the opposite direction on the top, and then it looks like he was maybe sitting there and he sat there and twisted the other ones with his other hand, like his left or something.
Yes, sir.
But you can tell something was sitting there twisting that stuff up,
yep.
and that's not a natural break.
Yeah, it's definitely sitting there with its back to us, and it's amazing that we was able to catch that with that cell phone that far off. But that pond has a history. Years ago, we had a couple folks that were working there with the cattle, and they were staying in a little house trailer fairly close to that pond. And they would go to that pond to rinse off. Well, they were in the pond rinsing off when one of these Bigfoot come walking out of the woods towards the pond. Well, they come flying out of the pond and ran over to the ranch manager's house and got inside and looked out the back windows, and they saw the thing turn around and walking back off into the tree line. So they were gone within a week. They were off that place.
Right. Wow, that's. You know what? When I'm looking at this picture where you've got these twists, always am looking for other stuff in the, you know what I mean, in the background. But that. Well, I don't know. See, it looks like something else in there, but maybe not. I won't say anything yet. But I can tell that there's something sitting there. That's you may have very well caught where he was sitting at, and the extra evidence of the tree twists. That just to me is two pieces of evidence that you had caught a Sasquatch sitting there. So do you think that they're sitting there watching the pond, maybe the field and what have you, or just sitting by the water, or what?
Yeah, he was definitely sitting there, and from that vantage point, you're partially concealed, and you can look over that top of that pond, see the whole pond. I don't know if he's sitting there waiting for ducks to come in and land or what, if he's looking for something to eat.
Right.
But I can't help but believe that thing knew we was there because we'd been there for most of the day, walking around, measuring, because we're getting ready to do some work on that rock house, and we had a couple of vehicles out in the yard, so I'm pretty sure that rascal knew we was there. But yeah, he's just sitting there. I don't know what he's doing, though.
Yeah, I mean, it was like we were talking earlier, too. They're very confident about their ability to hide. As long as they sit still, it's almost like people can walk right by them and not notice.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't surprise me at all, really. Well, what other stories have you heard of around there? What other encounters, if you have any others?
Well, there's twice that I have, and it was mainly in June or July, end of June, July. I've used a wounded rabbit call, and I got some activity there that more than I bargained on. And then there was a time when I was hooting like an owl. We was out there at our barbecue pit in front of the cabin, and exactly 100 yards west from there is our targets we have set up for sighting in our rifles. Well, I'm sitting out there with my children one night, and I hear this hoot owl, but it just didn't quite sound right. So I hooted, and boy, he hollered back at me. So the kids thought that was pretty neat, so I hollered again, and I get a response from down in that canyon where we found that huge wall of limbs and trunks had been woven together. And I hollered and hooted again, and I got two responses, and they were getting closer, and they were getting louder, and you could tell they were losing their mimicking of an owl. It was getting to be like turning into something else that didn't sound right. Right. And I hollered one more time, hooted one more time, and it sounded like something coming through the woods large. You could hear it crashing through brush and trees. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, my gosh, I've got to get the kids to the house. Well, you hear it running through the woods, and right there at the tree line behind our target, it just stopped, just went quiet. And I'm looking around, and then those trees started shaking, and it sounded like a mad monkey, like a cheetah from the Tarzan show that had his banana took away from him. They were just cutting loose. So I scooped the kids up, and we all ran to the cabin. And went back out a little bit later on with our rifles, and it was just dead silence. I mean, you could just feel that thickness in the air. It was so quiet.
So they came up to the edge of the woods, and
right to the edge. They would not come out in the open.
So they were They were shaking. They were shaking the trees.
Yes, they were literally shaking the trees, and acorns and the leaves were just flying off of there. And these are good sized trees, but they were mad. I don't know if it's because I was hooting back at them or what. But one was coming straight from the west, and then one came from the north up that canyon. And when they both met up, that's when we heard them busting through the woods, and then it just stopped right there.
Right.
And then they started tearing the trees up.
So when you heard them busting through, were they like? Did it sound like they were breaking limbs and trying to be loud?
Oh yes, they was busting through that brush. Yeah, there's no doubt something was coming through there. You could sure hear it.
Yeah, they can make a very, very loud rock. Sound like a car driving through the woods, you know.
Yeah. Yep. There was something coming through there. That's right.
And when it was making the shaking the trees, it was making a noise. What did the noise sound like?
Yeah, it was like a chimpanzees get real mad and they start that monkey. They go into a monkey rage or whatever. Right, that's what it sounded like to me. I was thinking, this sounded like Cheetah having a fit because someone took his banana. It was definitely a primate screaming and hollering.
Yeah. Wow, that's they were trying to intimidate you, weren't they? To get you to get
Well, they did a good job at it. They got us back in the cabin. Right. We came back out with spotlights and rifles, but it was so quiet. All the little chirper frogs around the pond. I mean, you couldn't hear anything making any noise for a while.
You know, that's one reason I tell people when they go out there and they make calls, you don't really know what you're saying, you know.
That's right.
You don't know how they're interpreting that. You could be ringing a dinner bell, or you could be challenging, or there's so many different reactions I've heard. It seems to me, I've even interviewed people where they were making like wood knocks and ended up with something coming up on them and scared them so bad they won't even go in the woods no more. So it's like, and he thought it was the wood knocking. He was making a real rapid tapping, and he said this thing got so mad it roared at him when it came crashing through and stopped like you just said. They stop right out of your visibility, and it's a tactical advantage. You can't see them, and then it hit him with a roar that it traumatized the guy. He'll never be right again. But
well, I had one. I had one roar at me one night. We park our vehicles to the west of the cabin, and usually we leave all of our exterior lights off just so we can see the little critters coming up, the possums and coons and all that, because it's fun to look out the windows at them. But it was probably midnight or so. I thought, I don't remember if I rolled my windows up or not in the truck. So I thought, well, I better get up there and check it. So I stepped outside the screen door, the front door there, and the minute I turned on my flashlight, it's like the one I use at work, to light up the truck, I got hit with a scream that I couldn't move hardly at all. I felt every one of my organs just kind of vibrating, and I pivoted at my hips while I'm shining that light, holding it up in front of me, and I pointed it towards a pond. And that's where I got my best view of one of these things. And it was bent over, looking towards the west, and it was kind of bent over, and it had its right hand up. And I couldn't, first thing I thought of, well, he's getting a drink of water, and he's kind of cupping it. And then I thought, well, maybe he's eating him a frog or something. But that thing took off, and he ran right back towards where our target is, and then down, you could hear him going down that canyon towards I-40. But I'll never forget that, because everybody in the house heard it. They come flying out there, and I didn't know what to tell them at first, because I had never been hit with a sound that made every one of my organs. I could literally feel them vibrating in my chest and all through me.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he was hollering at me because he was mad at me, or if he was warning others. I don't know. But it was loud and it was intense.
Yeah. Well, it seems, it really does seem like they're able to focus it in on a spot, because I've had so many stories of people telling about the roar. There's several different kinds. There seems to be like a siren type, really goes to a really high pitch kind of sound, starting low, and it goes really, really high. And then there's one that sounds similar to like a lion roaring, but way more, decibel wise. It's tenfold,
that's about what this was like. It's probably a cross between a bull and a bear roaring at the same time. It was just loud, and it was definitely angry.
Right, yeah. But I've had cases where the person feels it in their body, and it shakes their organs, but someone maybe 10 feet away didn't feel it. They heard it, but they didn't feel it. So it seems like they're able to narrowcast that as a kind of like lions use an infrasound. There's a few animals that seem to use an infrasound type ability that they have that can freeze their prey. A lion can roar at a rabbit, and the rabbit will lock up and freeze. And
well, that's pretty much what I did. I was just standing. All I could do was pivot at my hips, holding I had my light in my right hand, about chest high, shining it towards the truck. And all I could do was pivot at my hips, looking towards the north, and that thing was out there by the edge of the pond. Right. And then off he went running.
So
I couldn't have took off if I'd have wanted to.
Right. So it seemed to hinder your ability to move then. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, sir, it did. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Hey, there's a lot of people that reported that and said it'll freeze you in your tracks. They talk about it hindering them physically. And so I've been collecting, and kind of making sure I ask about that some because I have a theory on it, and um, I think it's it's a type of infrasound, and I think their vocal mechanism is different from humans for sure. That there's been recordings where a whistling has been caught in like the samurai chatters and stuff like that. But the whistling, when the experts looked at the whistle sound, they said that it wasn't really done with a lip, like the way that a person would whistle. It was done with the vocal mechanism. It was able to make that sound with its vocal cords without shaping the like we use our lips and we make the sound from the blowing the wind through, kind of like a flute or something. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. And now, you've had them coming around the cabin looking in.
There's been several times over the years we were there that late at night, early in the morning, you could hear movement around the cabin. One time you could hear the heavy breathing. It was like it was standing outside the window, just inhaling and exhaling. That'd be tapping on the windows and on the door. And one night we was sitting there, and it was like something was throwing persimmons up and hitting these large picture windows up on the like the second and third floor of the A-frame. So there definitely was out there messing around, probably getting persimmons.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any of the outside lights on. We always leave those off.
Yeah.
We didn't go out and check it out.
Do you think maybe they have one that's watching the humans, and while the other ones are picking the persimmons and things like that?
I would not doubt that a bit. I definitely know there's more than a couple of them out there, so I wouldn't put it past them.
Right. Cause, I had this one guy, actually a few times, that had one looking in their windows, and it kind of got to where it was aggressive with these people, and got aggressive with their dog and stuff. But anyway, what was interesting is that this guy basically grabs a shotgun and he goes running to the front door and was going to go outside, and he saw it looking in the window at the back of the house, but before he could get to the front door, it was at the front door waiting on him and roaring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was like, dude, they're reconning you. They know everything.
Yeah.
They know how your house operates and where you go in the house, and that's scary.
All of our windows in that cabin on the interior have these shutters that we close at night. The only window that would be open on the ground floor is that one by on the backside by the kitchen, where that one looked in when he went under that second level balcony. So we wasn't going to go outside and check it out, because we figured that was trying to get us in an ambush. You just never know.
Right? Yeah, I wouldn't. Wouldn't either.
They as far as I know, they really haven't been any acts of aggression except maybe one time, and that involved two of my children, and they literally had to call because they were in a bad spot. They went walking from the cabin. There's a dirt road goes down the hill towards the highway, and there's a steep canyon, and it's that one that they all come running up and down through. But there's on the edge of that steep canyon, there's this tree that's kind of hollow. And the kids for years would take rocks and chunk it from the road into that hollow, and you could kind of hear it going banging down the tree inside it. Well, they were out there throwing rocks into that thing, and they thought they heard a bunch of deer moving down in the bottom of the canyon. So I don't know if it was my son or daughter, but they threw a rock down off in there. And, it all broke loose. They started hearing screams. Rocks started getting thrown back at them. And they were thinking, oh, we got to get out of here. So they started heading back up the road. Well, off to their side, the side of that hill above them, they hear one screaming at them and start throwing rocks at them. And the more they went up the road towards the cabin, the louder these things got. So they were trying to keep them from getting back to the cabin. I think they was trying to push them down that road into an ambush.
Wow.
Well, they got on the phone and called, and we hop in the truck and take off running, and we come around the corner, and my son's standing there, and he's holding on to my daughter because she's about ready to take off in a blind panic. And he's got his AK out there, and he's ready to light these things up. And if we hadn't have got there, there's no telling what would have happened. But we could just caught, when we got there, we just caught the tail end of the last bit of the screams and all. But we got them in the truck and had to go all the way down the hill to turn around and come back up. But that was kind of a bad deal there. It could have gone real bad.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Maybe that ravine is a place that maybe is somewhere they either are using a hunting area. Have you noticed any like game trails going through that spot?
Oh, they're all through there.
Right.
There's deer trails all up and down through there, and people don't go down there very often. I mean, it's in the past 10 years, probably 3 or 4 times we've gone down in there because it's so thick. It's hardwood timber and a lot of cedar down in there, and the cedar is more or less in the bottom of it, and it is just thick.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's where they're staying. That's where they're living. If you find a place that's got cedars, I believe they try to live in areas where the cedars are because it's a better conceal area to hide. Places that have like mountains and hills and stuff, if you look on one side of the mountain, it'll tend to have more cedars than the other side. And when people go looking for them, it seems to me that they are encountering the type of structures that where it looks like the things are living where the cedars are, and near that, like they come out of where they're sleeping and they circle around some type of route where they hunt and things like that. But I would say they're living down in the area where the cedars are.
Well, that's probably so, because there's cedars all along the east edge of that canyon, going down into the bottom of it, and there's maybe a few on the west side, but mainly it's all along the east edge and down in the bottom of it. Yeah. It is thick.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you start paying attention, like in other areas you go, you'll notice that the cedars seem to be in this. You'll notice a pattern. Just kind of look. It's hard for me to explain it, but yeah, I would be careful on that spot if I was you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we don't go anywhere unless we're wearing our 44s, and I carry 45 70s. Both my son and I do, and then we have 12 gauge with the Sabo rounds in them because these things are too big to mess with.
Right. Yeah.
I know. I definitely would not. If I saw one, I would not take a pot shot at it. Right. I just leave it alone. And now, if it's trying to bite me or scratch me or mine, then we're going to light it up for sure. But other than that, we're not going to mess with them.
Right. Yeah, that's
we
wise.
for the longest time, we would take our table scraps, and I didn't realize how bad I was messing up until recently. But we would take our table scraps and take them out into the yard near the trees and dump them. And I was thinking maybe the possums and coons and critters are coming to get them. But then I got to thinking, well, maybe these guys are coming up there getting that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And that we may have been contributing to the problems up there.
Yeah. Well, how long ago did you stop doing that?
Well, it's been probably the last year. So all these years we was doing that.
Okay. Yeah. Now I've heard of a lot of times where things went bad when you stopped giving the food because they were getting some, stuff that they couldn't find nowhere else, and cases even where people come up missing.
Oh yeah.
But it sounds like you kind of know what you're doing. Leave them alone for the most part, and And if you do notice them, get out of there. Leave
Yes.
leave the area.
Well, at one time we had close to 400 head of cattle on this place, and only one time I can think of where I found a dead cow that they may have took. I'm not sure, but it was way out on the westernmost remote part of the place we have there, and there was a full-grown heifer out there, and she was laying on the side of this hill, and I noticed there's a lot of deer bones and things along that same side, but she was laying there, and she had been torn up. Her belly had been really torn up. There's no telling how long she'd been laying there.
Right.
But this is an area where we keep the cows away from. They normally are never out there at all.
Right. Hey, but one thing I almost forgot about is this dog man footprint.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You're probably getting about the time where you're going to be getting off work. I know you're on call, and I really appreciate you giving me some time while you're on call like this. Well, thank you very much. Tell me about this dog man print that you had found.
Well, over the years I've been hearing about Dogman, but I really hadn't thought too much about it. It's like it's just too way out there to be a real deal. Well, December, it was almost 2 years ago, we're out there with our metal detectors, going around these old homesteads, looking for coins and things. And so we'd been out there most of the day, and we go walking back to the truck, and right by the driver's door, probably 4 or 5 foot from it, there's this footprint, a canine footprint. And this thing was huge. And we get to looking, and we find one more, and you can tell where this thing wasn't walking on all fours. It was upright. You can look at dog tracks and coyote tracks, and you can see where they placed the front foot or the back foot near the front foot. This was not like that.
Right.
Well, we went to town and got some plaster of Paris and came back and made a cast of this thing. Right. And when we pulled it out of the dirt, I was just floored. This thing is probably 6 inches by 6 inches, and it had to be over an inch deep in the dirt, easy. But these toes are splayed out there. You can see the claws in it. It's got that center pad that's probably 3 inches or so across. I mean, this thing was huge. And it had come walking through there while we was off in the woods doing our metal detecting, because it was not there when we parked. I'd have seen it.
Wow.
But that just blew me away. I can only think of one time I heard any wolf-type thing at all, and that was several years back. About midnight, the train comes highballing through the town, and he's blowing that horn. Well, that usually sets the coyotes off. So we're sitting out the barbecue pit, and pretty much like clockwork, he comes highballing through there, and the coyotes start going. Well, one deer season, we're down there, and coyotes start their singing and all, and then it sounded like a wolf. I mean, it was so different. And as soon as that thing cut loose, all of those coyotes just hushed up. And you could hear it following this ridge howling. Wow. But I don't know if that was a wolf or what, but it sure wasn't a coyote. But that's the only thing I've seen in all the years we were there that would, could tie in with a canine or wolf or anything, except for this darn footprint.
Yeah. How far was it of a stride between the two?
Oh, it was between 4 and 5 foot from one foot to the other. And the toes were really splayed out there. I mean, wide. I don't know if it's because it's trying to support that weight or what. But it sure gave us a whole new outlook on when we're down there running around.
Yeah, that's a big print. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think I sent you a picture of that.
Yeah, you did, and I'll be showing it as you're talking about it. But that's a massive creature.
I took a cast of print of our black lab. She was 67 pounds when we cast this print, and you put it beside that thing, and it looks like a chihuahua.
Yeah. If you have a picture of the regular dog print handy, send it to me. If you get it to me in time, okay. I'll add that in there for a comparison shot.
Okay, I'll put it beside that one print and take a picture and send it to you.
Yeah, and you did a good job, man, because you casted that print and you put a tape measure in this picture. So that's, I mean, you can't ask for better than that, for
Well,
sure.
we just wanted to show how big this rascal was, and we got to looking around after that. And the next day, we were down in the bottoms, and that's near this creek that runs parallel to I-40. And we found a lot more footprints, but they were puddled up. There was water in them, so we really couldn't cast them. But evidently, we've got something running up and down that creek, and it did get up on the top side there for sure.
Wow. It have you noticed it there just basically during this one time, or have you checked it back and seen if it's still hanging out?
I didn't get a chance to go check on it this last trip down there, but we're going to be going here probably spring or fall break, so I'm definitely going to be making the rounds down there just to check and see, because it's really got me curious, especially since we got that picture of that thing sitting by the pond.
Right, yeah.
Because that's all pretty much close vicinity to that creek running along the highway.
Right. Okay, Bill, if you would, man, I'd like for you to tell us about your military Bigfoot and the Boy Scout Bigfoot stories that you were mentioning yesterday when we were talking.
Okay. Well, in the early 70s, I was stationed out at 29 Palms, California, and doing some guard duty out there and some training out there. And the big thing they had us watching out for or being aware of was what they called the Yucca Man. And evidently it was a Bigfoot type creature running around out there in the desert area. And we definitely was told if you encounter this thing, you get on the line and call for the sergeant of the guard, have him come out there, and then he would pass the word on up, because evidently they knew about these things. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I never did see anything, but I did hear a few strange howls and all when I was out there.
Right.
But that was the big deal that everybody was really watching for, hoping we'd get to see it, because we heard so much about it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I've heard some stories of like border patrol in those deserty areas, and you wouldn't think that Bigfoot or even these Dogman creatures would be in those areas, but there's stories of them encountering, and the person who does overlook with the infrared and guides them into the people crossing the border. They'll every once in a while see a big predator, walking on 2 feet, and they'll tell them, they got kind of a little code thing they'll say, and that'll, let them know to get out of there. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting. I couldn't remember what that name was today when I was thinking about it, but Yucca Man,
The Yucca Man.
Wow, that's very interesting.
I never did hear why they named him that. I always figured, well, maybe it's because he was tall as one of those yucca trees or as wide as one, but that definitely was the big thing we was sure watching out for while we was out there on that guard duty.
All right.
Wow. And then as far as the scouting goes, I've been an assistant scoutmaster for close to 20 years, well, right at 20 years now. And we've been able to camp all over Oklahoma in these different scout camps. And over the years, we've had several interesting things happen that I believe they're Bigfoot related. There's no doubt in my mind about it. There's one scout camp in particular where we had our first really dramatic encounter. It was back, close to 10 years ago. And it's kind of central Oklahoma, off to the east just a little bit. It's a real primitive scout camp, no modern facilities and all, but it's a wonderful place to go camping because you carry everything in, you carry everything out. But we had got to camp and got all set up, got our chow, made our meals, ate our chow, and then we always go for a night hike. The ones that want to go can, they're more than welcome to go. We'd go out and just look for, critters at nighttime. skunks, possums, whatever we might come across. But we was walking down this, basically it's a ridge. It drops off to the right, drops off to the left, goes straight down to the Canadian River. And then on the opposite side of the ridge, going down to the right, it's off into this, it's kind of like a bowl-shaped area, and then there's some oil lease property out there. So we went for a hike at night and was walking along and following the trail or the dirt road, and then it eventually became just like a path going down off towards that oil lease property. And as we was getting down in there, the grass and weeds were getting pretty darn tall. It was probably 5 or 6 foot tall. It was as big as elephant grass, just fields of it. And it's probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and it was foggy down there, and we're walking down this path, and it's pretty narrow. I mean, you could stretch both hands out and touch both sides of the weeds and all. But we got down in the middle of it, and it sounded like a full-grown cow just took off crashing through this grass on our left side, running up the slope, like it was going to go over that and then on down into the river. Well, we're standing there looking at this thing, and you could kind of see it cutting a path through the grass. And it got all the way up to where it starts climbing up to go over the ridge. And there's a bunch of trees over there, and the trees just started shaking. You know, we didn't hear any yelling or screaming or noises, just this thing crashing through the brush. And it got to the trees that were right at the top of this ridge. And it started shaking the darn things. And I'm standing there. I've got a rechargeable spotlight lighting it up. And I see all these leaves falling off these trees. Well, then I realized those are birds that were up there roosting. And this thing is shaking them out of the tree. And I thought, well, we got to get out of here. So we didn't run, but we started backing out of there. And as we're backing out, going back to where we was camping, it started coming back down towards the path that it ran from, and then we had another one on the opposite side. And then that's when we heard a couple of screams, and it just kind of got us motivated to get back to the campsite as quick as we could. We did not run, but that was the longest, about a quarter-mile hike I've ever had.
Wow!
But we got back there, and I was watchful for anything around the camp, because we had a latrine set up, probably 50 yards from where we was camping. And it was right off in the woods. Of course, we had a lantern going there, but we definitely had to use the buddy system. Nobody got to go anywhere by themselves. If they went to the latrine, they had to take a buddy with them. But everything was fine. After that, everything was fine. And that same camp, probably 6 or 7 years later, we literally had 2 assistant scoutmasters run out of the woods by rock throwing, and then we had one scoutmaster that was basically went to use that latrine, and once he got in there, he refused to come out of there until almost daylight. So what happened was there's a hiking trails at that campsite. There's a north trail and a south trail. That south trail, you follow it, takes you to the river, come back up to the main road, and then you cross that and you take the north loop and then come on back into camp. Well, the 2 assistant scoutmasters started out on the north loop, just kind of scoping out the area, because we was going to have our scouts take pretty much a 5-mile hike to complete that loop. And they weren't in there more than 15 or 20 minutes, and they come busting out of that brush and come flying out onto that dirt road, and they were just, you could tell something wasn't right. They were just all tore up. So we got to talking to them, and they said they were out there, and they got to feeling like something was moving with them. And then these rocks started getting chunked at them. And then they heard a roar or a scream. I don't know what it was. They're the ones that heard it, but it got them into a run back to the road. They just bushwhacked clean through those woods to the road. So we had our noonday meal and thought, well, do we want to go ahead and complete this 5-mile hike or do something different, just hang around camp? Well, the guys voted that let's just go ahead and do our hike and everything will be fine. This is the middle of the day and all that. So off they go. They complete the south loop. and they get up onto the North Loop, and the rocks start flying past them and landing, and crashing through the trees and landing on the ground. And these aren't small rocks. These darn things are probably close to 11 or 12 inches in diameter. They're flat slabs coming at them. So that was it. They got back. We cut that hike short and got back to camp, and that was it. We were going to just spend the rest of the day working on our merit badge work in camp. And I definitely was watching for anything that might possibly come into camp, but we really didn't have any problems that way. But it started raining that evening. It started a pretty good rain. And, of course, the scoutmaster, he went over to use the latrine, and we didn't know it until after the fact. When it's almost daylight, he comes into camp, and he's ready to load up and go. And what basically happened was he went to use the latrine, and while he's in there, something comes up this trail through the woods and it starts circling that latrine he's in. It's out there raining. He can hear it walking around, making a moaning noise. And he says every now and then it was like it was shaking the rain off of it, kind of like a horse will do. It'll just kind of shake to throw the water off of it. And he said that's what he had a mental image of. But he said there's no way he was coming out of there until he saw the sun coming up. And we did not go back to that campsite for probably 3 or 4 more years until that particular scoutmaster retired from scouting, and then we got another one in, and then we started going back there. But I've always kind of slept with one eye open there, because there's twice now that we've had problems there, and you can look. I looked up the history on the campsite as far as I could find, and it said back in years ago there was one scout killed there by a mountain lion. Now that's just one website I found that on. I can't find any documentation or details about that.
Right.
But it's a great campsite. It's very primitive, and we really enjoy going there. But we definitely are on high alert. That's for sure.
Right. Wow.
Let's see. That's probably the most dramatic things happen. Now, we were at one campsite in eastern part of the state that has a lake beside it. Well, it's right in the camp, the scout camp, and we had been hiking there most of the day. And my son and I had spotted what we thought were tree breaks and limb twists, but we just really didn't have enough time to go over there and really take close looks at it, because we were hiking and had to get from one place to the other and get this over with. But it was probably that second night we was there. I was laying in my tent, my son was over in his tent, and they say it's a 4-man tent, but really when you get your gear in there and then you're in there, it's pretty crowded. But about 3 a.m, something hit me through the wall of that tent, and it hit me so hard it knocked me in my sleeping bag from one side of that tent to the other, knocked all the air out of me. And I'm standing up trying to catch my breath and find out what's going on. Well, I finally get the tent door open. I go running out there, and I don't see anything. All of our guys are sound asleep. We're the only people at that campsite, at that entire camp, other than the caretaker, which is about a mile away from at the main entrance, where he stayed. So I don't know what it was, but I had a bruise on my ribs. That was about the size of a grapefruit where this thing had kicked me. And I never did figure out what that was.
I mean, what the heck could it have been for something?
Well, I went through, I thought, well, maybe a tree limb had dropped and hit me. Well, there was no limbs on the ground. I don't know what it could have been. I thought, well, none of our scouts would have done that, and they were all asleep in their tents anyway. And I can't imagine an intruder coming in there and just picking my tent and either kicking or hit me that hard to literally it knocked me from one end of the tent walls to the other.
Right, so that's a fairly decent. I mean, that'd be a heck of a kick to. Where you laying?
Oh, yeah.
So you were laying kind of close to the tent wall.
I think I was up against it, and it probably presented an outline there. I'm not sure, but that I've never woke up like that before. I mean, it flat knocked me. I went airborne from one side to the other, and I'm trying to get awake. I'm trying to catch my breath, trying to get outside to see what the heck's happening. And once I got out there, it's just dead silence.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I bet you it saw an outline of what looked like a person, and it kicked it to see what would happen.
Well,
Kind of goofing off.
It could have been.
Kind of like poking the fish tank,
Mm-hmm. Yep. It could have been. I thought a tree limb had hit me at first, but there's no trees there. Not where I was had my tent pitched. So we watch out for that.
I don't think a Boy Scout could kick you hard enough to knock you over to the other side of the tent. I mean
none of our guys did that. No, they wouldn't do that. And I can't imagine an intruder trying to get into that area because it's really isolated, and we were way back in there by that, probably within, I'd say 25, 30 yards from that lake.
Wow.
So I just don't see anybody coming in there at 3. It was like a little after 3, and I looked at my watch to just kind of see what time it was. It was a little after 3 when that woke me up.
Man, you've really had some good campsites for Boy Scouting. If you.
Oh yeah.
Well,
here in Oklahoma, we've got some wonderful campsites. They're all across the state, and some are pretty well developed with the modern facilities, and then there's some like Sasquatch that is it's pretty primitive. And our troop, we like that. We like going in and carrying everything in and carrying everything out, because you do get to see a lot of the animals and things that you probably wouldn't see in a more developed campground.
Yeah. Back when you were young and all, did you believe in Bigfoot or know much about it?
Yes, sir. I tell you what, I can tell you it was 1958 when I was, I was 6 years old, and my mom's relatives all lived in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and I can remember I knew about the abominable snowman. I knew about that, but I can remember being at my great-grandparents' house when 2 of my adult cousins come in one night, and they were just all stirred up, and they were telling my parents and my grandparents that they had seen an abominable snowman. And it was out on a highway, it was out north of Fort Smith going towards Mountainburg. And it had almost run them off the road. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, how silly can that be? That abominable snowman is over there in the Himalayas. There's no way in the world it's here in Arkansas. I was just thinking, well, just one of those things. But I never did hear any more about that. It was just, they were really emotionally tore up and scared. And of course, the parents and all, they just kind of poo-pooed it, and I was just thinking there's no way, because there's only one of those things, and he's sure not over here in Arkansas.
I guess I guess that was the closest thing that in 1958 that anyone would know that, when they see a Bigfoot, it looks like an abominable snowman.
Yeah, well, that's what it was called. I mean, we didn't know anything about Bigfoot or calling it that or Sasquatch, but it was an abominable snowman.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. So you never did ask him anything about that later in life?
No, I didn't. Well, it was shortly after that. I grew up in a military family, and we more or less Dad got transferred, and we moved out of country, and we would just come back and forth every year or so, back to the States or somewhere else. But I never did get a chance to talk to him.
Where was that? Was that in Oklahoma?
No, that was Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yep.
wasn't paying attention or something.
Yep. I do remember they said they was coming back from Mountainburg, going down the highway, and an abominable snowman ran out in front of them, and they almost wrecked their car.
Wow. That is interesting there. Well, I tell you what, you've had a bunch of really, really interesting pieces of information and stories, and This is going to be one of the best shows yet. For
Wow.
sure.
Well, you know, the way we was raised we was hunting all the time. I mean, at an early age, my brothers and all of us were all out in the woods, either camping, fishing, or hiking. You know, mom and dad really loved the outdoors, and they instilled that in us. And then I knew about Bigfoot pretty much up until 1970, but I really didn't think a whole lot about it until I had my encounter. And then I started trying to learn all I could about it, and then I learned what to look for when you're out in the woods, and like the tree breaks and all that. And I spent a lot of times out there in the woods, my sons and I, the entire family, and it's really interesting. You see a lot of neat things out there in God's nature. It's just a wonderful place to be. But you got to know how to be safe out there, and you got to know what to or what not to do if you're in an area where there's that type of activity. You know, just because you go in the woods don't mean you're going to see anything. But if you go someplace where there's been a history of sightings, no, you probably will encounter something, and then you got to know what to do, because it could go bad. It could go south on you real fast.
Right. Well, it's stories like yours, you know, and the opportunity to talk about it that help people to know. So that's why I'm very appreciative when people come share. That's for sure.
Well, that is fantastic. You're doing a great service to the public, getting this information out, and it's keeping people safe. You go to the woods, do not let your children go out of sight. Right. You gotta keep your eyes on them. They can't be out there running around, and it just scares me to death, because I've got 3 kids that we've raised, and there was times we would let them go off and run around and do things on their own, but there's no way in the world I would let that do that now. Let that happen. Not after knowing what I know now.
Right. Yeah. No, man.
You gotta enjoy the woods, but you got to be safe about it.
Right. It sounds like you've got a real squatchy place where you're at, maybe even a little bit of Dogman stuff. So Eastern Oklahoma has got a lot going on out there that the locals they won't talk to you about it. Right. Unless you're part of the group there. Even this place out there that we have, they really don't say a whole lot about it, but they do tell us don't be out there camping. You know, it's not safe because of the woolly buggers up there. Right. Well, I'll tell you what, I know that you said you were going to be retiring in a year. I definitely will look forward to, whenever I'm coming that direction, calling you up, and I would love to go out and see your property and see if we can find something. I talked to the guy earlier about the camera. He's testing it out, the night vision and the setup that he's making for me. So I'd look forward to testing that out one of these days. So thank you for coming on and sharing your stories, and all the pictures are great too. And I hope you like what I've done on cleaning some of them up, or clean that one. I cleaned that one up anyway, and it kind of looks like it's facing forward toward you all. And so anyway, you can let me know what you think about that when you see it.
I will sure do that, and I really do appreciate getting a visit with you about all of this. And you come to Oklahoma, you just let me know, and we'll go out there and see what we can stir up in those woods.
I sure will. And just hold on the line there if you don't care. And everybody out there in YouTube land, if anyone has anything they would like to share, pictures, video, stories, and you think that the stories would be a good fit for the show, contact me at brentonson@gmail.com. If you want to contribute to help with this show, you can find a link to PayPal me in the description, and it's super easy to use. And until the next time, we'll see you on the next video. God bless and bye.